So today we are continuing in this series we've been in called Different. And the gist of the whole thing is this, that God wants to use us to bring heaven to earth. To as individuals and as a community together, to go into broken places on this earth and bring heaven to them. Jesus said, when you pray like this, Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, where? On earth as it is in heaven. And so how is it that God's kingdom comes to earth? What is the primary way that it comes? Well, it comes through you, and it comes through me, and it comes through us together. It comes through any who are willing to seek him and serve him and be used by him. But that means then that we can't live just like this world. Right? If we're going to make a difference, if we're going to make a change, okay, to bring heaven to this world, we can't live just like this world. Something about us has to be different. So to be salt and to be light, to make a difference, to make a change, we can't just live like everybody else. We have to be different. And today, what I want us to think about is how we relate to people. Like who it is that we connect with, and we just gel with and we connect with easily, and then who we don't. Who is it hard to connect with? And how does God want us to respond to both groups? There's been a lot of research done on human attraction. Now, I'm not just talking about like romantic attraction, like between a man and a woman. I'm talking general human attraction between any two people. What causes somebody to be attracted to another person, to be drawn to another person? And when you think of all the possible factors that might affect attraction, now Cam, you can't answer this because I know you know the answer to this, but everyone else is in on this. When you think of all of the factors that cause someone to kind of be drawn to another person, whether it's physical appearance, common interests, that kind of stuff, what would you guess might be the greatest determining factor in whether or not you will like another person? Okay, of all the possible factors, what's the most significant? I want you to take a guess. I want you to turn to the person next to you and share with them what you think it could be. All right. I want to hear some of your ideas on this. Somebody shout something out that you think might be a big factor. Smell. That is caveman-like, but I love it. I would not have put that on the list. I love that that's the first answer. Sophie, you know the way. How about something else? How they make you feel. Right here. What was it? What was that one? Opinion of dogs. That's okay. All right. If you're a dog person, that's going to be a really big deal. If you're not a dog person, that's going to be a big deal. Okay. Another one? They're like you? So just similar. Okay. All right. So some research was done on this. And here's the conclusion. Okay, are you guys ready for this? Let's have a little drum roll. The greatest determining factor as to whether or not you will like someone is this: whether or not they like you. It's whether or not they like you. Now, in retrospect, I think this makes a ton of sense because I don't know about you, but I don't really like being around people who don't like me. But the people that like me, those are good people, right? And it really, if you think about it, like even if there's somebody out there and I don't really like them all that much, and then I hear that they like me, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I kind of always knew that person was a good person. Maybe they're not so bad after all, right? And so, of course, the number one factor that determines if you won't like somebody is if they don't like you. If I find out that this person doesn't like me, they could be a sensational person in every other regard. They could be like Mother Teresa. But man, I find out Mother Teresa doesn't like me and she's on my bad list. There's something seriously wrong with her. And this is human nature, right? We like people that like us, and we dislike people that dislike us. This is how the world works. But Jesus is inviting us into something different. And today we're going to look at some very challenging words from Jesus. And these are words that have, throughout the last 2,000 years, they have been badly misunderstood. They've been taken to mean things that he didn't mean. And so we're going to unpack some of that today. But these are also words that have just plain been ignored. In fact, for the last 2,000 years, these words have often been badly ignored. Possibly more ignored by Christians, by those who would say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus, than anything else that Jesus taught. Like if you think about the darkest seasons and expressions of Christianity, like you think about the Crusades maybe, or the Inquisition, or the Ku Klux Klan, you think about the church being judgmental, intolerant, unkind. Whenever the church has been characterized by that kind of stuff, the words that we're about to read have been ignored. And I will say this, whenever the church has embodied what Jesus dreamed it would be, whenever the church has resembled the character and the life of Jesus, whenever that's happened, these words are always central to it. And when pockets of Jesus followers have actually begun to live these words, these are the times where the world has seen salt and light, and the church has made a difference in a huge way. This morning, we're going to wrestle through some very challenging words, very challenging teaching of Jesus. And as I read this, I'd like to have us stand in reverence because these are powerful, powerful words. Okay, here we go. This is Matthew chapter 5, starting with verse 38. And Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, 'Eye for eye, tooth for tooth.' But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect." Okay, you can be seated. So Jesus concludes this teaching with something really obvious, that it's human nature to love the people that love you and to hate the people that hate you. And yet Jesus says, look, like even the pagans, even the people that don't know God or love God, even pagans love the people that love them. They do. What credit is it to you if you're only good to people that are good to you? This is how the world loves. This is the way of the world. Jesus says, but you are citizens of a different home. This world is not your home. And if this world is not your home, then you need to be different from this world. Here's a key way to do that. Jesus says, find a way to love the people that don't love you. Now, sometimes I think as Christians, we get confused right off the bat. We get confused by this. We sort of assume that Jesus is talking about preferences and the way that we feel about people. I mean, as human beings, uniquely wired by God, I think it's safe to say we all have preferences. Apparently, some of us have preferences about dogs and the way people smell. We all have preferences. Okay, this is part of you being you. And it's not wrong or right, it just is. For instance, okay, little survey, I just want to see where we're at as a church. How many of you really like sushi? Oh, yeah. I knew you were my people. How many of you can't stand sushi? Like, yeah, see, That's not a sin. I just want to throw that out there. It's not a sin to like or dislike sushi. How many of you really like to watch sports on TV? Mm-hmm. How many of you can't stand watching sports on TV? How many of you that can't stand watching sports on TV married someone yeah, that smells good? So it's not a sin to like or dislike watching sports on TV. This is getting a little closer to the heart of things this morning. How many of you like cats more than dogs? You like cats more than dogs? Oh, I see a little bit of this. How many of you like dogs more than cats? Interesting. Okay, I don't know. I haven't seen any verses. I don't think it's a sin to prefer dogs over cats or vice versa. How many of you like country music? Yeah? Turns out that's kind of a bad example because it actually is a sin to like country music. I think I read it in Second Hesitations years ago. Okay, listen. Okay, guys, we all have preferences. That's part of what it is to be human and to be unique. We all prefer certain things over other things. And guess what? This will be true for you of people. It will be true for you of people, and you will prefer certain people to other people, and there is nothing wrong with that. Okay, that is not a sin. And so I want to be clear. Jesus is not saying here, somehow you have to make yourself feel equally warm and fuzzy about everybody all the time. That's ridiculous. But Jesus is saying that it's right and good to show love to everybody. Like, even if they're not our favorite, even if we're not their favorite, even if they don't show love to us. It's not about warm and fuzzy feelings. It's about kindness being expressed. But the concepts of turning the other cheek and going the extra mile and like giving the shirt off our back, these are phrases that are common in our culture now. But they have been terribly misunderstood. And a lot of times, like, people will look at these words, and maybe you even felt this as we read through the passage. People will look at these words and feel this sort of despair because they think, well, Jesus just wants me to be a doormat, right? Like, if someone hits me, I have to not fight back and just let them keep hitting me. I have to always give somebody what they want when they ask for it, no matter what. Like, this might be nice stuff, like in theory, but the truth is it just doesn't work out well in real life. And I'm sure that Jesus meant well, but he obviously didn't understand life in the real world. And can I just say something? I think Jesus understood the real world. I do. I think that he understood this world on a level that no other person ever has, ever. He understood human realities. He understood complexities. He understood the moral dilemmas that we face. He understood better than anyone ever how life is meant to be lived. He understood what human beings really need. He understood what deadens our hearts. He understood what causes our hearts to come fully alive. These are not the words of some dreamer, someone that's out of touch with reality. The truth is that the words of Jesus here are life. They are life. They are the way to life. But to experience life through them, we have to understand them and get the point. We have to understand what he's actually wanting us to do. So let's go back to the context. Here's what was going on when Jesus said this. Jesus was, at this point, kind of walking around healing people day after day, place after place, healing the deaf and the blind and those with leprosy. He was casting out demons and demon-possessed people. Like, this really happened. And then in the midst of all of that healing, he would often stop and then he would teach. And the main theme of all of his teaching during that period was this. It was, and this is how it gets summarized, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has now come near. So when the gospel writers, when they want to just summarize overall the teaching of Jesus, they summarize it like this. They say, well, he taught about the kingdom. So everywhere he would go, he would heal the sick, and he would display for them the kingdom of God being right in their midst. And then he would teach, repent, for the kingdom of God has now come near. In other words, life together with God, in God's favor, in God's presence, that life has now become available on earth to ordinary people. The realm where things are as God wants them to be is now being made manifest right here among you. And so Jesus would look at them and he would say, it's all around you and it's available to you, all of you. And any one of you can enter into it if you wish. And so Jesus would teach over and over and over, place after place, that very thing. And one day, Jesus takes a break from all of the healings, and he goes up on a hillside, and he sits down to teach. And he begins to then paint a series of word pictures, these illustrations of what life in God's kingdom on earth might look like. How people aligning themselves with God and God's dream for human beings, how those people might actually begin to live. How they might approach the realities of ordinary, everyday life. But these pictures are something that we need to understand. Like turn the other cheek, give the shirt off your back, go the extra mile. These are not commands that were intended to be followed mindlessly. They're illustrations given by Jesus for how we might treat other people that don't treat us well. How we might love people that don't love us. So what I want to do is I want to take a couple of minutes and just walk through each one of these and get our minds around what he is saying and then get our minds around what he's not saying. So the first is Matthew 5:38. He says, you've heard it that it was said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Now, right here, Jesus is quoting out of the Old Testament. This is from Exodus chapter 21, the law that God gave to Moses. And sometimes people hear those words right there and they're just stuck because it's like, well, wait a minute, eye for eye, tooth for tooth? That sounds barbaric. Like, why would God ever say that? Why would that be in the Bible? And that's a legit question, I think, so let's start there. Imagine human life in its earliest days, like ancient civilizations. Very little government structure, no constitution, no justice systems. It's every person for themselves. So if you hurt me, what do I want to do to you? I want to hurt you back. And this is human nature, right? Like when you think about it, do we have to teach this stuff to kids? I mean, like, why do we need adults over in the toddler area next door? Why not just throw all the toddlers together and see what happens? Can you guys imagine what would happen with no authority in there? It would be chaos, the tyranny, the toy stealing, the hitting, the biting. You guys, we don't have to teach kids this stuff. It's all that we can do to teach kids not to do this stuff. Why? Because this is the human condition. I mean, what happens when a Crip kills a Blood? Well, then the Bloods kill a Crip to get even, maybe more than one, right? This is how it works in our world. Now, thankfully, in our day and age, we have police, right? We have laws, right? We have a justice system, right? But think about a world where there were no laws to prevent that stuff, and there was no police to oppose it, and there were no courts to punish it, and that's the ancient world. And one day, into that world comes this command, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And this was not a teaching intended to communicate that you should always try to get revenge. It was an intent to limit retribution, to limit retaliation. It was saying, look, if somebody knocks out your tooth, you can't just go kill him. It was a teaching about justice. It was saying there ought to be proportional retribution. Because maybe you've noticed, but retribution always tends to escalate. Like you punch me in the arm, and when I punch you back, I just want you to know this, I will hit you harder than you hit me. And here's a big reason why this happens. because pain received is greater than pain inflicted. So the pain inflicted on me always feels more severe to me than the pain that I'm inflicting on someone else. And there's all kinds of research around this too. One study took a group of subjects and paired them up in twos, and people would receive a painful amount of pressure against their finger from the other person. And then they were told to exert an equal amount of pressure on the other person's finger, and they measured it, and guess what? They always inflicted more pain than they received. Now, I want to demonstrate this in a way that you guys will always remember. So everybody stick out your index finger for a second. Now take a look at it and make that thing as rigid and firm as you can, okay? And when you've got it, firmly poke it into the eye of the person next to you. No, okay, we live in a world, right, where the rule is you hurt me, I'll hurt you. This is what we do. But Jesus is saying, okay, look, now in me, with my help, there is actually another option for human life. And so then he paints some pictures of what some of those options might look like in very practical, tangible ways. He gives his audience examples from their everyday world. And this is why these are difficult for us. They're not a part of our everyday world. He's like, here's what it might look like to not live by eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And the first one I think most of us know very well. It's very famous. Verse 39, he says, "But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." Can I just say, guys, Jesus is not saying here, and this has been badly misunderstood, he's not saying here that if somebody starts hitting you, you have to just let them keep on hitting you until they either wear themselves out or feel like stopping. He's describing a very specific situation that people in his culture knew all about. Okay, this is not a picture of a fist fight. It's a picture of an insult. Jesus is describing this backhanded slap that was a part of their culture. And this kind of slap was a very common public way to insult somebody. And everybody knew about this. The intent of the slap was to shame somebody in front of other people. You remember Jesus being on trial and what happened when they wanted to insult him? They slapped him. And so let's be clear about this. Jesus is not saying that if you're like in an abusive situation, especially like some physically abusive situation, that you're supposed to hang in there and just keep enduring it. You can stand up for yourself, and you can protect yourself, and you can involve justice, and you can walk away from the situation. You don't have to just keep being abused, saying to yourself, well, I guess I just have to take it. Jesus tells me so. Jesus does not tell you so. And this is about insults. This is not about fistfights. So Jesus is saying, okay, listen. Let's say you become my follower. Let's say you become my follower and you're living in the reality of the kingdom, and then somebody insults you with this backhanded slap. What should you do? He says, well, here's what you don't do. You don't retaliate by insulting them back. You refuse to return insult with insult. You break the cycle of hurt for hurt, okay, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. You do something different. Guys, Jesus is saying, instead of returning hurt for hurt, find a way to love those that are insulting you. Find a way to let it go and to respond in love. Do something different. Don't follow the ways of this world. Don't just follow your human nature. Live like a citizen of heaven. Learn to live your life a different way and watch what God does in the world through you. Then Jesus continues with two more examples. And now he takes it up a notch. Beyond just not retaliating, he suggests actually doing good to people that are mistreating us or oppressing us. He says, and if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Now, the idea in all of these pictures is really just doing more than what's required. Someone is making like really unreasonable demands of you, but instead of resisting them, you actually offer them more than they're asking. Jesus says, someone wants to sue you for your shirt. Here's an out-of-the-box idea, he's saying. What if you offered them your coat as well? What would that communicate about who you are? How shocking would that be for them? Can you imagine? But this was not a command that we always give people whatever they demand in court. I mean, you guys, there's so many cases. You just think about this. There's so many cases where trying to do that would be absolutely absurd. Sometimes you need to fight for justice, right? You need to. For instance, sometimes other people's well-being is at stake. There are Christians, and this has happened countless times. There are Christians that have decided not to fight with their ex for their parental rights. Like after a divorce, if their ex takes them to court in anger and is doing something really unjust and what's not best for everybody, they think, well, I just have to give my ex whatever they ask for because Jesus says so. Guys, Jesus does not say so. And so why would someone give away all of their parental rights? I mean, like the kids have to lose their parent? That's just totally wrong. And it's not what Jesus is saying. And then the go the extra mile reference is similar. Again, everybody in his audience knew the situation that Jesus is talking about. This was a very tangible, very relevant example in their real life. We all know that Israel was an occupied territory. Rome was their oppressor. And a Roman soldier was allowed by law to force an occupant of any occupied territory to, like in this case, a Jew in Israel, to just walk up to them anytime they wanted and force them to carry the soldier's pack or gear for up to 1 mile. That's what the law said. The soldiers can make you do this for up to 1 mile. So if you're a Jewish person, you could just be like going about your day, doing your thing in Israel one day, and a Roman soldier could walk up to you and say, here, carry this. And you were required by law to stop whatever else it was you were doing with your day and do it and carry the pack for this soldier for up to 1 mile. Now, can you imagine if you were being ruled by an oppressive culture and this was happening to your people regularly? Can you imagine how angry you'd be? But Jesus says, okay, what do you do in that situation? A Roman soldier makes you carry his burden for 1 mile. Jesus says, might just be a boy, maybe 18 years old. He's from another part of the world, doesn't want to be here, is probably poor himself, probably been beaten down himself. He's not wanted here, and all he gets from our people is hatred. Jesus says, imagine this. This Roman soldier makes you carry his gear for 1 mile, and now he's like, imagine this. Here's an idea. Just throwing it out there. What if after you finished the mile, you looked at him in the eye, and what if you said to him, you know what? I bet you're a long way from home, and I bet you're pretty tired. And I bet your life here has been pretty hard. Could I give you a little more help? Could I carry this for you another mile? Jesus is saying, okay, that's different. Can you imagine how that kind of thing might blow that soldier's mind? Nobody does that kind of stuff. Guys, nobody does that kind of stuff. That's crazy. But again, Jesus is not giving us a no matter what kind of law here. He's not saying you must always do this. Like, even if the soldier says, well, no, actually, I was planning on stopping right here. You say, well, Jesus said I got to take it another mile, so here we go, buddy. I got to do this no matter what. Okay, this is not a command to follow mindlessly. It's a picture of loving differently from this world. It's an example of what we might do, and it's extreme. It's an extreme act of love. because it's not of this world. It's heavenly. And this is how heaven comes to earth. This is how it comes through you and me. It comes through people that learn to love differently. And see, the thing is, God has this dream for our world. He has this incredible dream for our world. Not just heaven one day, but our world right now. But this is the way. This is the only way. God has a dream for our world, and He's at work through anybody who is willing to be used by Him. The thing is, that's crazy about all this, is that there are other forces at work as well. And they too have a dream for this world. And they too are willing to use anything and anyone. A few years ago, tragic event made something really clear to me. It just hit me. I was thinking about what God is trying to do on earth. Like His dream for humanity and our role, what we're being invited into in it. And something happened, and it just kind of hit me and just sort of woke me up. When my daughter Kate was a freshman in high school, she's now a sophomore in college, but when she was a freshman in high school, I picked her up from school one day, and I was just picking her up, and I said, like I always did, "Hi, baby." And she got in the car and collapsed. And she choked out, "Dad, Quinn Scott committed suicide today." And then she just absolutely lost it and just huddled up into a ball. Now, I think that from the time that Kate had heard that news all day long with all of her peers, she held it together all day. And then you know how it is. You see someone that's safe, right? And when she verbalized it, that's when it hit home. And it was overwhelming. And I've never seen her inconsolable like that, ever. And I was just stunned. I was shocked, just I don't even know what to do. Now, Quinn, this boy, was also a freshman at Kamiak, and he was a very close childhood friend of Kate's. And they had gone to school together since kindergarten. They were in the same close circle of friends and everything, all the way from when they were really little. And a few months prior, actually, they had gone to homecoming together as friends, and they did the big group thing, and they went as friends and all that. And I knew Quinn. I'd coached him in baseball. Cameron had played baseball with him, and I'd coached him. He was a good kid, good ball player, and I got to know him a little bit over the years. And I also got to know his parents, especially his dad, because we coached together for a little while. And just a nice family, nice guy. And I will tell you this about the whole thing. Nobody saw it coming. This was a kid that seemed to have it all. He wasn't being bullied. He was a good athlete. He was a good student. He was a popular kid. And so there was just no good explanation for this happening. And I think the hardest part in all of it for me, the most overwhelming part of it, was imagining what his parents were going through. And I just was like, oh God, I can't even imagine what they're going through, what this is like for them. And so that night I went to bed, and I was laying in bed, and I just started to pray for Quinn's parents and his sister. And as I thought about God in all of this, and I thought about His heartbreaking in all of it too, I just envisioned there being tears in heaven. But then I had this really random, super dark thought pop into my mind. And I realized that while God and the angels were all grieving together over the pain of this, there are other spiritual forces that weren't grieving about it at all. Now, I don't like to think about this, and I don't talk about it a lot. But guys, there are forces, dark forces in our world that act behind the scenes. And if you follow and read about the life of Jesus, you see them manifest all throughout His ministry. And it occurred to me, and I don't know why, but it occurred to me that while those forces were actually rejoicing over all of the pain and all of the devastation of this situation. That while God is in the business of healing and of grace and kindness and hope, that there are forces that are hell-bent on destruction, pain and suffering. And those forces are active and they are present in our world. God and the angels are about peace and joy and love and life, but those forces are about hate and despair and hopelessness. They're about everything that is not good, everything that is anti-God. And for some reason in that moment, that night, I was like overwhelmed by it. And I had clarity about something. That we're living in a war zone. Okay, you and me, this world is a war zone. It's a world caught between two kingdoms. And the enemy is never, ever, ever, and this is what Jesus wants us to see. The enemy is never, ever, ever other people. All of us are essentially children of war, and we've all been wounded, and we've all been damaged, and we've all been scarred. But we have to decide what our lives are going to be about. Like there's a war going on, and at any given moment, we can fight and choose to fight on either side of it. We can perpetuate hate and despair, or we can bring about love and hope. We can hurt those that hurt us, or we can do everything in our power to put a stop to the cycle. And so, see, like, the thing is, we have to decide, like, almost every moment, which side of this thing we're on. And I think one of the reasons that Jesus is so extreme with his teaching and his examples, one of the reasons that he challenges us to such a radical life is because those two kingdoms were more real to him than they've ever been to any human being who's ever walked the face of the earth. For him, the clash of these kingdoms could be seen and felt everywhere he went. Okay, Jesus was not a dreamer. He wasn't out of touch with reality. He was the only person ever fully in touch with reality. And he understood the hope of the world. That the hope of the world is transformed hearts. It's people that are learning to live somehow in a new reality, in a new kingdom. People learning to live with this new and different, radical kind of love. And you think about what happens when people return hurt with hurt, when this is just what we do. Right? You think about what happens in families. You think about what happens in schools. You think about what happens in workplaces or in friendships or in marriages. You think about what happens between nations, or you think about what happens between ethnic groups. How many of you, I've talked about this before, but how many of you have seen the movie Hotel Rwanda? You guys seen that? Man, it is such a graphic portrayal of what really happened in 1994. 1994 is not that long ago. Close to 1 million people in Rwanda were killed in 6 months. You know why? Because hate was returned with hate. And it escalated between two ethnic groups, and close to 1 million people died as a result of it. See, Jesus wants heaven to come to earth. He wants us to pray for that. He wants us to give our lives to it. Because until somebody stops the cycle of vengeance and hatred, heaven will stay in heaven, and this world will just continually resemble hell. Jesus wants us to let go of what's natural to us. And he wants us to live differently. He wants it because it can truly change the world. Now, I think about our own country, and I think about the horrendous mistreatment of ethnic groups in our country. And it's happened throughout our history with various ethnic groups. But I think about how possible it would be for the United States to end up like Rwanda. It's very possible. But in our country, it's been amazing because certain ethnic leaders chose a different way. They actually chose the way of love and grace. They chose the way of love and grace when it wasn't in vogue and it wasn't cool and it wasn't what our culture said, this is what we value. They chose it anyway. I think about the tensions between whites and blacks in our country. And I think about how unjustly African Americans have been treated throughout the history of our nation. And you just think about how much hatred was possible. You think about how much violence was possible. But there was a dynamic young black Christ follower, among many others, who was more than justified to continually preach a message of hate. And in that same time frame, many of his brothers did preach a message of hate. But Reverend King took the words of Jesus very seriously. And he used his influence and his words to paint a completely different picture. And so here was the famous picture that he painted. And I can't do these words justice, but I'm going to read them the best I can. He said, "I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even in the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today." And then he finishes it with this. He says, "I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted and every hill and mountain shall be made low." It's a reference to the Old Testament. "The rough places will be made plain and the crooked places will be made straight." And he says, "And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed and all flesh shall see it together." And you guys, that vision, it changed our country. And he lived it. He died for it. And you think about it, he could have preached, he was justified to preach a message of hate. And he could have incited people to act in violence. And as much violence as there was and has been, as bad as it's been, the reality, you guys, is it could have been so much worse. Without leaders, courageous leaders like Dr. King, who knows where our country would be? Who knows what kind of a people we would be? And today we live in a better country. There's still a long way to go, right? But we're moving in a better direction. And there's a lot of healing and a lot of good that has come. But it's only happened as people that have been mistreated and have been beaten down have let go of their desire to hurt back. It's only happened as courageous people have somehow learned to love their enemies. The reason that Jesus wants us to somehow become serious about this is because this kind of radical love truly changes the world. And we think about this on a national scale, but it changes every little pocket of human society. It changes families. It changes broken friendships. It changes workplace environments. It changes schools. It changes communities, and of course, it changes nations. Jesus was dead serious about this because it changes things. It's the only hope for our world. Because this world, do you think about it? This world will not be redeemed by a better economic system. It's not going to be redeemed by better education or a more advanced political arrangement. Those things are really important, but ultimately, when you think about gangs and violence and wars and ethnic cleansing and broken homes and shattered hearts, what is ever going to heal that? It's the way that says, okay, the evil and the hurt and the cycle of hostility, it's got to stop, and it's going to stop with me. It comes down to You and me being salt and light. Now, in all honesty, your real life situations are going to be very different from first century Jewish people, right? Very few of you will get slapped on the cheek this week. Probably no one is going to sue you for your coat. It's not likely that a soldier is going to walk up to you and force you to carry his stuff for a mile. But you will have all kinds of opportunities to practice this week, and so will I. And when that happens, because you will get hurt, you will get mistreated, you will get insulted, I just want to encourage you to think of this phrase, and the phrase is, here's my chance. Here's my chance. And the idea is that each moment when there's something difficult, relational problems, somebody hurts you, somebody treats you badly, there's injustice towards you, you can pause and you can say, before you react, here's my chance. When you get hurt or insulted or overlooked or mistreated, you can say, you know what? I don't have to live a you hurt me, I hurt you kind of life. Because now, in Jesus, another way has come, and it's a better way. I don't have to be a part of the mutual hostility that is destroying our world. It can stop because I can let it go. And I can actually extend kindness. Here's my chance.